This is Power and Influence 101. This is what you need to know about networking in the workplace, and they don't teach you this at school. Everyone needs to know these tactics and skills no matter what role or industry you're in. Watch this entire video through because you might not agree with everything we say, but you definitely need to know these skills and tactics exist because people at work might be using them on you.
And stick around because for each of the 4 skills, we're going to have a small exercise that you can do while you're watching.
I'm Cherie.
I'm Jean.
And we're the Tiger Sisters. Hey guys, quick break to let you know that we now have merch on sistersmatcha.com. We have sweatshirts and t-shirts that we designed ourselves. Go check it out. And please rate us 5 stars on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. These ratings are so important for the distribution and survival of Tiger Sisters podcast. Thank you for your support.
The first skill we're going to talk about is actually the most underrated skill to have in the workplace: listening and empathy.
So there's a really famous saying, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that's because you should listen more than you speak. When I worked at LinkedIn as a senior product manager, one of, I think, the skills that was most important for my role and also to get ahead is to really listen well and listen actively, not only to our customers, but also to our teammates. So my role as a product manager, super cross-functional, working with different roles and, different types of personalities. And the number one thing that you have to do in that case is to hear everyone out and to listen actively. And what that means is that when someone says something to you, you can repeat back and clarify your own understanding with them. So you can say hey, what I'm hearing is this. Did I get that right? That's a really easy way to make someone in the workplace feel like you're actually listening to them and not thinking about your next point that you want to say.
I can definitely corroborate that because as a head of product at Snapchat, not only did I have that same experience as an individual contributor when I was a product manager, but as you become more senior, a lot of your role is actually managing relationships, both of the people that you manage, your cross-functional partners, managing up. And that all starts with really listening, not just listening, but listening in a way where the other person feels heard. That's actually, I think, the nuance of it. It's not just listening and empathy, it's listening with empathy so that the other person feels listened to.
Yeah.
So it's that's the secret to it.
By repeating back what you heard the other person say, you're confirming your understanding with them.
Yeah.
Because too often, I've had those conversations with people where they're just thinking about their next point. They're not actually listening to you, but they're prioritizing themselves and what's on their mind rather than what you're saying. So you can repeat what they just said back to you. And the most empathetic thing that you can do is not only just listen to them, but make them feel heard.
In the workplace, a lot of problems actually stem from people not feeling heard. People feeling like their voice is being ignored, people feeling like they don't have influence on an outcome, people feeling like they are being sort of smushed down and repressed. Overridden. So even just playing that role of listening to the person and having them feel like you are really hearing them out. And even if you can't necessarily do something about it, it still makes a really big difference. And it goes a long way in building goodwill and kind of building out a long-term relationship with that person.
This is probably the most important thing you can do for relationship building. And if you're not a naturally good listener, honestly, or if you're not naturally an empathetic person, with no judgment, I'm just saying these are skills that you can work on and make it seem that you actually feel more empathetic. And I'm not saying that in a weird way, but these are things you can work on.
Well, so that's why I actually like your suggestion of repeating it back. That's not something that I do because I feel like I don't need to do that per se. I have other ways of naturally listening to people with empathy and really understanding them. But I feel like that's a really good method of starting out. And also almost it's a forcing function of if you go into the conversation and you're okay, my goal is to repeat back to them what they said to me, then you're actually going in and trying to actively listen and actively understand.
Yeah.
So that's why it's actually a very, very good tip, even if you're just starting out on your journey of being a really empathetic listener.
Yeah. And the other person will correct you if you are not understanding or comprehending exactly what their point is. And that sometimes happens to me. Sometimes like people will like, you know, have like a really long paragraph of a thing they said. And I was like, wait, I don't know if I actually understand that.
Yeah.
Did I get this right?
Yeah. So it's both like for practical reasons and for
your own comprehension.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last thing I'll say, I think something I'm going to say a lot throughout this episode is information is power. And that's something that I feel like I only learned further along in my career, or I only fully, deeply understood further along in my career. And you can't get information if you're not listening.
Mind blown. She thought she dropped a truth bomb there. Maybe it is a truth bomb.
Yeah.
We shall see in this episode.
We shall see.
So a way to practice this is if you're in a low stakes meeting with people that you trust, you can speak last in the meeting, summarize everyone else's points succinctly, and then make your own point to show that you're bringing in other people's ideas. So one way that this might look like is that like at the end of the meeting, you're like, what I heard Brittany say was XYZ. And then Tim said ABC. Like, I really like that point because, and then you go into your own point and you can kind of be the person who connects everything together and is like the summarizer, but then you also add in your own idea. So this is something to try yourself. And in your next meeting, if there's someone who you admire in the workplace, you can kind of see if they do this well, because really good storytellers and really great presenters are often looked to as the summarizer who brings everything together.
Yeah, I feel like it can sort of sound cheesy as an exercise or as something that you actually do IRL. But as you were saying it, I remembered why it's so powerful. It's because also when you reference other people in the meeting, they kind of like perk up and they start to listen. And then they automatically kind of have buy-in into what you're saying because you said their name first.
Well, so they feel heard.
Exactly. They feel heard. And then they kind of are automatically supporting your point because you referenced their point.
Especially for building on top of what they're saying.
Yeah. So it's a way to kind of like build consensus, to build allies, to sort of build towards a point that you want to make by building on other people's points.
You thought this was simple. This just got 10 levels deeper on how to use listening and empathy at work to get ahead. It's actually much deeper than it sounds.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that part before this. Okay, the next skill we're going to talk about is executive presence, which is the #1 skill you need to be taken seriously in any room you go into.
Executive presence is a bit harder to define, but have you ever like seen someone speak, like a CEO, a leader, maybe, you know, your VP, and like they just exude confidence, calmness, and gravitas? That's what executive presence is, and it's something that can really be felt. Someone really owning the room and making sure that their presence is something that is very memorable. This not only is in what they're saying, but also nonverbal cues as well. So it's eye contact, it's posture, it's tenor of their voice. Is their voice shaking, or are they saying things with confidence? And there's also studies out there that show it's not only like obviously what you say, people like don't really focus on that as much, but it's really like how you look and how you sound.
And it's actually in a lot of things you wouldn't even think about. So one example of a nonverbal cue is, let's say there is a big meeting room. We have a lot of people walking into the meeting. I remember a lot of times at work, there would be, 12 seats around the table, and then there would be all these seats along the side of the room for everyone, right? Mm-hmm. So if you walk into the room, where are you sitting? Are you sitting at the table, or are you sitting on the sides? When you go to sit at the table, are you going to sit in the corner, or are you going to sit next to the #1 person in the room? So these are all like little things that without you even saying anything, you're telling people how you perceive yourself, right? You're telling people, this is what I consider my role to be in this room, and this is how you should regard me.
Totally. And also, like, we're not going to tell you where to sit because it's different in every single context.
Can't sit with us, though.
But you should know that, like, people are strategic about this.
Yeah.
Maybe you might not be right now, but you should know that everyone else in the room, a lot of people in the room are very strategic about where they sit and how they show up.
Yeah. And maybe it could be the other way around. Like, let's say you're going into a meeting and you actually don't want to be perceived. You don't want to be a big part of the meeting. Don't sit at the table. Don't sit at the table, right?
Yeah.
That's why people are always like, sit at the table.
Right.
Right. That's why it's like a sort of a trope.
I have a funny story.
Okay. It's a trope for a reason because it's literal.
Yeah. And also there's like studies out there about how like women don't sit at the table, more men gravitate towards the seats at the table, whereas more women gravitate towards the seat at the back of the room because of like, you know, power imbalance, whatever. But like that's also where it came in. And like Sheryl Sandberg, one of her famous sayings is take a seat at the table, ladies. But my funny story is that when I was an intern at LinkedIn, I was a note taker for a strategy meeting with the then CEO, Jeff Weiner of LinkedIn, CEO and like head of product. And I was like a note taker. And obviously I didn't know anyone in the meeting except for like my like mentor or boss who was presenting. But like there's like a seat that Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn, would sit in every single time.
She was barely invited to the meeting.
Yeah, I barely made the cut and somehow I like, you know, caused a ruckus. Not really, but like there's a seat that the CEO sits in and like everyone else, all the VPs of product would, you know, come to this weekly meeting so they know where he sat. Me being a newbie, I have no idea where he sat. So then I take the seat next to Jeff Weiner before he walks in. Like there's just, it's an empty table. Everyone's filing in and I just sit at the table. I'm a note taker. I need to put my laptop on something. What am I going to put on my lap? No, I'm sitting at the table. And I put my laptop down and then, you know, 5 minutes walk past. No one says anything to me, but I get kind of some glances. And they're like, who the hell is this chick? Who's this like, you know, a 20-year-old sitting at this table? Jeff Weiner comes in last because, you know, he's like busy as the CEO. He sits next to me and I was like, fuck. I'm sitting next to the CEO. And no one said anything.
Did you introduce yourself?
No, I was scared. I was like, oh shit. I was like, I have made a grave mistake. And so like in the meeting, I'm just like typing up notes like right next to the CEO.
Yeah.
As he's like, you know, not berating someone, but like going really hard into the strategy.
But going hard in the paint?
Going hard in the paint.
Of the strategy?
Exactly. Isn't that a funny story? Yeah. Just to say like where you sit, like it signifies something.
Yeah. And well, is that something that you've noticed now? Like people strategically choose where to sit in meetings?
Yeah, for sure. Also, I mean, we're going to go into this more later in this episode, but like not only coordinating where you sit, but coordinating what you say in a meeting. Like you think everything is the ad hoc. No, honey. Things are honey. No, honey. Things are happening behind the scenes for the most part. If people are smart about it, they've already talked about what they're going to say and, you know, rehearsed it. Not even to say it's like a like malicious rehearsing. Everyone's
no, it's just kabuki theater.
Yeah. In some ways, it really is.
Another big part of executive presence is seeming calm and collected, no matter the circumstance. You can do this even if you feel really, really nervous going into a meeting or a major presentation, or if you have to speak in front of, you know, either 1,000 people or 5 people. One thing that you can do, I actually think like Evan Spiegel told this to me at one point, is instead of saying to yourself that you feel nervous, you just say that you feel excited. Like whatever you're feeling, you just reframe it. And then by doing that, you're not really nervous anymore. You're like, oh wait, I'm excited. I'm like ready to like jump into this. The reason I feel all these like butterflies and I'm feeling like, you know, a little bit tingly is because I'm excited. I am prepared. I'm going to get out there and share my message with people and they're going to love it.
It's like a very subtle mindset shift, but on the other side of nervousness is excitement.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I've actually always remembered ever since then.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty famous thing. We learned that in business school too. When I took my executive presence public speaking class, is that like we literally had a lesson on like the mindset shifts from nervousness to excitement.
Oh, wow.
It's like a real thing and studies show.
Oh, good. And then what about you? Can you share like a tip you have?
Yes, I love this tip and I do not take credit for it. Credit to shout out Eric Wellenbacher, one of my old bosses, my former bosses who told me this tip, and it works for me and I hope it'll work for you. Super easy. Try it out. People are so scared of presenting. I think public speaking is the #1 fear that everyone has, and it's even higher than death. I think people fear death less than public speaking. Everyone gets the jitters. I'm not immune to that. And so before presenting, something that I do, it's not power posing. I don't do that anymore. Like what I do is I try to get a quick like heart rate cardio exercise in, nothing intense. You can do push-ups, you can do jumping jacks, jump up and down in place. But like my heart before I present is beating out of my chest. You know, it's like boom, 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 boom. It's my heart rate's super fast, but my body is not in motion, right? Like usually when I'm running, that's when my heart rate is up. But so I'm trying to get my heart rate and the way my body feels and all the jitters aligned. And so by doing like a quick exercise, you're able to feel more aligned physically so that you can go in and present well.
So like a few jumping jacks or something?
Like whatever, jumping jacks, run in plays. I just like jump up and down sometimes, but like it's a way to get your heart rate up a little bit more. And I just feel more focused in my presentation because everything physically, in my body feels much better.
Up next, building a powerful network. Because having executive presence is not going to matter if you don't have allies in the room.
One of the things that's really hard about starting at a new company or starting at a new role in a new place is that like you don't have any friends, but like you also like don't know who are your allies.
You're a loser.
No, it's just hard because like when you've been at a company or a place for a long time, you know who's got your back. It can be your boss or it can be, your peers, so that you feel like you have support in a meeting. So I think mentors and allies, when you go into a new environment, those are two things everyone should be seeking out.
And I think a lot of that is not as structured of like a do A, B, C, D, E, F, G as you would think it would be. A lot of it is kind of going to come naturally as to like who you gravitate towards, who gravitates towards you. Kind of, I think, just more like be aware of that and then lean into those relationships. And then also, I would say one thing you can be more directive about is cultivate relationships across all parts of the company, because it's actually not as helpful if you just have all of your primary network and your primary relationships in your one group. It's actually much more powerful if you have allies and friends throughout the entire company.
And I think a note on mentorship, something that I've done, and Jean just touched on this, is like it should feel very natural. I think it's odd, and I do not recommend asking someone directly like, will you be my mentor? Like I think nowadays people are not doing that, and it's much more informal mentorship. After you've had coffee chat with someone and you feel like you really vibe, you can ask for a follow-up and meet them for like another like 2 coffee chats. And after the third one, like as you're bringing up questions or things you want advice on, like the mentorship happens much more organically that way. Because I think I've seen a lot of young people first ask is like, will you be my mentor? That's pretty like direct and too much of like a fast build.
It's jarring.
It's pretty jarring. I'm like, I don't know you, you don't know me. So like a relationship needs to be built, and you don't have to be like explicitly like, will you be my mentor? Maybe you can say that like after like coffee date 3 or something. But I think you just need to build a relationship first before actually like any mentorship really happens.
Yeah, I think the only exception to that would be if you are really early on in your career and you're put into like a program where it's explicitly mentor matching and it's meant to match mentors to mentees. Then you're then it's almost like, when you're like, when you go on a date, then it's like explicitly romantic. It's like when you're mentor match, you're like explicitly in a mentor-mentee relationship. So you can kind of just go into it being more explicit about it, basically. But if you're sort of building it from scratch more organically, it's a little off-putting to just say like, hey, will you be my mentor?
When you don't know each other.
Yeah. You want it to feel natural.
I would say something that I've done is like I've been a little bit more like intentional about it. So like, yes, I'll have coffee chats with people. Once I see someone in the company, whether they've presented or, they were in a meeting together and I really admire something about them, it's like, I can tell, I'm just like, oh, their career is really cool. Like I'm like much more explicit. And like, I've made a list before of people who I'm like, I need to follow up and like at least reach out to them. And if they don't respond, I'll reach out another time. I just like have a tracker. And that sounds insane, but like that's one way that I'm able to keep it very intentional in my life and also have really strong relationships that grow over time.
The other thing that I remember is that, especially if you're really early on in your career, a lot of people are interested in mentoring really young people because anyone can help them. like any number of skills can be taught to them. And so I remember when I was early on at Goldman, we did have some mentor-mentee programs, but I also was talking to a friend of mine who was in a different org than me. I was in investment management and she was in sales and trading. And I kind of asked her, I was like, hey, like, do you have any mentors that you really, really look up to and you really cherish your relationship with them. And she was like, yeah, like this amazing woman, Teresa, like I would be happy to introduce you. So then she actually connected me with her mentor. And then me and then this woman like actually ended up building this really great relationship. And I really looked up to her in a lot of ways. One, you can actually ask your friends who their mentors are and kind of share resources that way. And then two, having mentors in different orgs is also very important because they have a different perspective and they have a different understanding of the company than someone who's necessarily in the exact same org as you. And they can also sort of be your sponsor and speak to your skills from in a different context and in a different way than someone who actually works directly with you.
I think a really practical takeaway from this conversation about mentorship and allyship is like, one, reach out to people, like be very intentional about like building relationships. I think it's something that can often, go by the wayside if you're not thinking about it all the time. So I think being intentional, and something that I appreciate, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, but when I've mentored people and when I go into like a relationship where I'm the mentee, I think coming in with a very explicit agenda of what you want to talk about and also what you want to get out of, the 30-minute coffee conversation. I've gone in and been like, these are the 3 things I want to talk about. Like, is that cool with you? Because I think it shows that you've put a lot of thought into it and you're trying to make the most of the time with the mentor. So you really respect their time. You're not going in and being like, so like, what are you watching on Netflix? I've literally had a mentee mentorship conversation where someone asked me like, what are you watching on TV these days? And I'm like, this is what you want to get out of the conversation with me? Like maybe, but I'm like, I don't really feel like I'm helping you in the best way that I would feel most fulfilled in helping you, like I can help with so many other things. Like it was just odd that I felt like they hadn't really put as much effort into, teeing up the conversation, thinking about what they wanted to get out of it as much as they could have. And that wasn't really fulfilling for me to help out.
On the mentor side, when someone comes in and they have a very specific sort of agenda in a good way, and you can sense that they've done sort of like research ahead of time and they are very directive in their asks and their conversation, then you're kind of more willing to open up your own network more and open up and offer more of your own resources, because then you're like, oh, this person has their shit together. They are really goal-oriented, they're ambitious, they like actually want to do XYZ. So I know if I introduce them to this other friend of mine, they're not going to waste that person's time. They're going to, follow up. They're going to follow up. They're going to utilize and respect their time as much as they have for me. I love to introduce people to other people so that they can have like more resources and like follow-on conversations, but not if I felt like you didn't really, put the time into the conversation with me.
So the 4th and final skill we're going to talk about is negotiation and influence. Jean, could you describe this a little bit more and how it takes place in the workplace?
Yeah, so I think negotiation and influence is sort of the pinnacle or the like final step, the final boss of if you've done all these other things correctly, because you're not going to have a successful sort of negotiation and influence experience if you haven't been listening, if you haven't been building up your network, and if you haven't been able to express yourself well and have executive presence. I think a big part of going into negotiation and having influence is basically knowing what your skills are and knowing what you provide for other people, and then also really understanding what everyone else has in terms of their sort of resources, if that makes sense. Okay, one example that comes to mind for me is that I remember when I worked at Snap, there's this one time where at the last minute, me and my coworker, Jeff, were pulled in to do a massive presentation where we had to sort of fly from LA to New York to do this presentation sort of at the last minute to some sort of executive team. And I was personally worried more about the actual, not the content of the presentation, but actually like putting the presentation together, physically making all the slides at the last minute with such little heads up. And then what I realized when talking to Jeff is that he actually had sort of a team beneath him that was really, really good at making presentations. So he was like, oh yeah, I'm not worried about that at all. I have this team and they can make the presentation for us. But as long as you have the content, and then I can sort of, work together with you on the content. I guess it's important to know what resources other people have so that you can then work together. And it's not so much negotiating an influence, but it's more so collaborating and producing.
No, I mean, I took a class at Stanford on negotiation, actually.
Okay.
That was taught by one of my professors who's like Michelle Gelfand, who's written books about this, studies this. But you're actually talking about, oh my gosh, I can't even remember the name of the concept. But there's like a concept where like 1 + 1 = 2, and then 1 + 1 = like 5.
Yeah.
Where like you actually find out when you're negotiating, you want different things and you're able to make it all happen because your top priority is not in conflict with another person's top priority. There's like a really special negotiation concept that talks about it. If you guys are both fighting for like a zero-sum game, that's when negotiations can get really tough and ugly. But like if you are negotiating with someone, understanding what their concerns are, what their wants and needs are, and if they are like perfectly fit like a puzzle piece, that's like the best situation where everyone can potentially win.
Yeah. And I think calling it negotiation is a little bit dramatic because yes, there are times in the workplace where you are going to be negotiating, but I think it's more so you think about it not so as negotiating, but working together to try to find a solution that is the best outcome for all parties involved. Is that negotiating?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I guess
I think every conversation is a negotiation.
Yeah, but it just calling it negotiation sounds very, it just sounds very adversarial, which in reality it's not, right? So in this situation, both Jeff and I wanted to do a really good job and we wanted to, crush this presentation, even though we had to do it all at the last minute. I think mostly we were aligned, or we found a way to align our goals. I don't know. I guess it could have been like I wanted to be the star of the presentation or he wanted to be the star of the presentation, but that wasn't the case. We were just like, let's do this together and do a really good job together.
It's information gathering. It's having those conversations because a lot of the times, the perfect example, this is now I'm remembering in the negotiations class. It's okay. You and your friend Sally have an orange, only one orange. How do you split it between you and Sally? So the way where it's a zero-sum game and you don't have enough information, you cut the orange directly in half and you get half of the orange and Sally gets the other half of the orange. That's, a really easy and simplified way to do it. No one actually really wins. When you talk to Sally and you have a conversation, you information gather, she wants the peel from the orange because she wants to use it for like a dessert that she's making. You in the negotiation want the juice from the orange because you want to make orange juice. When you have that symbiosis and the puzzle piece come together, you and Sally can both win because she can have the orange peel and you can have the orange juice.
She can have 100% of the orange peel.
Yes.
And you can have 100% of the juice.
As opposed to 50-50.
Right.
Where no one really gets what they're looking for.
Right. So instead of both ending up with half, you both end up with 100%.
Do you like that example?
Yeah.
I took this negotiations class. It's really coming in handy in this podcast episode.
That's a cool example.
Right? There's a name for this concept. I'll look it up and I'll put it on the screen. But I think so many of the times we don't know what the other party is looking for and we go in assuming it is a zero-sum game.
Yeah,
and
assuming that it's adversarial. That's most of the time it's not.
Most of the time it's not.
Yeah.
It really isn't because especially if you're negotiating with your boss on compensation, maybe you want higher salary and they can give that to you or, but you guys should talk about bonus because maybe there's more wiggle room there. You know what I mean? If you don't know what the other party is going for, then you kind of don't create the best situation for yourself.
Yeah. Or another way of putting it is that if you're going into that negotiation, both of you want to keep you at the company for the long term and both of you want you to, succeed at the company and take on more work and be an even better version of what you are today. So starting from there, how do you then fill in all the other pieces?
Right.
Okay, so I think we can wrap this section up with a really quick 3-step influence framework. The first one is to research the collaborator or opponent, however you want to call it, and understand what their goals are. What are their KPIs or key performance indicators, or what are their motives, essentially.
Yeah.
Then 2, think about what you want and figure out how to frame it in a way that also helps them achieve their goals. And then 3, once you actually head into the conversation and you present your proposal, be ready to make sort of trade-offs and be ready to kind of come up with creative solutions so that you can share what your goals are. And then you can make those goals be 2 halves of the peel and the orange juice and try to, reach that outcome together.
after hearing these 4 different skills, like don't be afraid, don't be scared of them. I know it can sound like a lot, but honestly, like you don't have to do all of these at the same time if you're just getting started. I think just focusing on one, being very intentional about it, and working on that specific skill can help you get started so it doesn't seem as intimidating.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to say is that the 2 of us gave examples that are mostly in finance and tech because that's the majority of our working experience. But these skills can be applied to any role and any sector, whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or you work in a non-tech field, or if you're, a CEO at your own company.
Yeah. If nothing else, I think like just watching this episode through, you can get a better sense of some of the tactics that people use in the workplace. So you can just be more aware of like what's going on, because a lot of these things are like the unsaid, things of the workplace that like people don't really talk about explicitly unless like you learned it from a family or a mentor or a parent that like kind of understands the inner workings of the professional world, where Jean and I didn't really have that, and we had to learn it ourselves and then also kind of seek out mentors who could teach it to us.
Yeah. And now that you know these things, you might start noticing them, whereas you didn't notice them before. Or the next meeting you go into, take a look and see where each person is sitting and why.
We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you tried these tactics? Have you seen it in the workplace? And I do want to address the maybe feeling of ick after, hearing these tactics, like ick. It's so, manipulative. Ick. It's so rehearsed. I just want to say that this is kind of the reality of the workplace these days. And like, I don't think there should be like a frame of judgment. I think people have like a natural reaction to things feeling very political at work. But I think that is the modern American corporate workplace. There's a professor at Stanford GSB named Jeffrey Pfeffer who wrote a really famous book called like Power or Paths to Power. And he talks specifically about this. And if this is the framework that we're working in, how do we play within the rules and the confines of that framework? And if you do want to make a change and be like, it shouldn't be like this in the workplace, I think like you're only able to affect change once you are in a position of power.
If you actually understand the landscape that you're working within, you can't make a change if you don't even understand what's going on around you and what everyone else is doing and why. And for me, the feeling of ick goes away, or you don't have the feeling of ick when you feel like, I really believe in what I'm trying to do, right? Like I believe that what I'm trying to do is the right thing. It's the best thing for the business, or it's the best thing for my team. And I have a strong belief in my mission and my goals. And so these are the tactics that I need to use in order to achieve my goal, which I have strong belief in. So that's kind of like, I think the other way to think about it. If you're thinking, if you're feeling like weird about the topic.
Well, also like within these confines, like what do you feel comfortable doing and what do you not feel comfortable doing? I think that really goes hand in hand and like falls back on your own values, because I think there are people that I've seen who take the politics of the workplace and they take it too far for my comfort level, and I get icked out by that. And I'm like, that is so Machiavellian. I would have never done that. Like, what are, then my judgment sets in and I'm like, I hate this person. But like, there are ways that I've found that I can do it in a way that I feel authentically myself. And I've seen leaders do it in their own authentic way where I respect them more, not less because of it.
We'd love to hear from you guys. What are your biggest challenges when it comes to these sort of soft skills? Is it speaking up in meetings? Is it getting mentors? Is it building allies? I'd love to hear from you, and then we can do more content on it.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of the Tiger Sisters. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you enjoy this episode, please share it with a friend who might like it as well. We'll see you next time. Bye. Hey everyone, quick break to share something special. Sisters Matcha. We've launched limited batches of ceremonial grade, single estate, single cultivar matcha, straight from the family farm Cherie worked on in Japan. It's pure, authentic, and crafted with intention. Head to sistersmatcha.com to grab yours before it sells out. Make matcha your daily ritual for lasting energy and focus.